You all for attending today. Happy Friday. This is a lunch without a lunch, but thanks again for attending. A couple of housekeeping things, and then we're going to get rolling with this. We want to leave a lot of time for questions. My name is Paul Cauchi. I am the Chief of Commercial here at the Association, and I wanted to again thank you all for attending. We have been doing a lot of these webinars, and they've been posted on MiamiRealtorsLive.com if you're a member. We did one on force majeure. We just had one on 1031 exchanges and opportunity zones, which we posted yesterday because just a few days ago there were some IRS changes and extensions. I want to remind everybody to be on mute. Please be on mute, and I can always mute you if I need to. But please stay on mute so that we don't have any background noise. I want to remind you or let you know that we're going to take questions, but we will take questions at the end. So please know that we're going to take questions at the end, and you can, in the chat, you can give us the questions when Blaine is done. If you send questions prior to that, we will not be able to answer them and we may miss them. So please hold your questions to the end, and we will take them there. The only other thing that I want to mention, which I've been doing at all these, but is important, nothing on this webinar should be construed as legal advice. I know there's a lot of questions that involve legal issues, and we are not, none of us are attorneys, not even honorary attorneys. So we cannot answer those. If you're a member of Florida Realtors, then you can ask, they have a free hotline at Florida Realtors, and they can answer your questions. So without further ado, I want to introduce my 2020 commercial president, Fernando Arancibia Jr. Why don't you take it over, Fernando?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you all for being here. It's so wonderful that we get together during this time of great uncertainty and provide a little bit of perspective. I wanted to make a few comments about the work that your Realtors associations are doing both at the local, state, and national level, specifically in regards to advocacy. Advocacy is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I'm a big believer of the RPAC, the Realtor Political Action Committee, and all the work that is done. And now more than ever, we see the effects of having 1.4 million realtors represented at a national level in conversations that are happening regarding the construction of the original CARE Act. And more importantly, and I know it's important to a lot of you business owners and your clients, this extension of the CARES Act or the replenishment of an additional $250 billion. I want you to know that the National Association of Realtors is advocating and pushing for it and working hard to make sure that it happens. NAR and Florida Realtors Association and the Miami Associations of Realtors, we do it in conjunction with our affiliates and our partners. I want you to know, for all commercial practitioners, there is a lot of resources out there from SIOR, from IREM, and specifically, and I would like to highlight the work of CCIM and all of the resources that have been provided and access to Ken Conway, Casey Conway, I'm sorry, who is a great economist and has been able to provide a lot of presentations for all of us through CCIM. This is an event that we had planned to put together, and you know, we had done it last year in conjunction between Miami Commercial and CCIM, where we were able to bring Blaine Strickland to talk about highlights of his book Thrive, which if you have not picked it up, I highly recommend for all commercial members. And the plan was to do it again this year with his new book called Adapt. I think that there is no more appropriate timing than to discuss the idea of adapting. And so I want to say thank you as I introduce Michael Hinton, who is the president of the Miami chapter of CCIM. but more importantly, he is a governor and he is on the board of directors for Miami Commercial. So Michael, take it away.
Thank you,
Let
Fernando.
me just mention something real quick. We are recording this program for you. Some people are already asking that. I just want to let you know we are recording it, and we will send you a recording. It should be by the end of the day. We'll send you a link to it. Sorry about that, Michael. I just wanted to let them know. Thank you.
Not a problem. Just a couple of things about CCIM for those of you that are not familiar with what we do with CCIM. CCIM is affiliated with the National Association of Realtors as well as the local Miami Realtor Association, and we have we take education to a higher level. So the designation is a series of classes that you take. You submit a portfolio, you take a final exam to earn your PIN and your designation with CCIM. And a lot of you have taken the classes and you're probably wondering, well, we can't go to the classes right now. Those in-person classes are suspended right now. The Institute has been creating some new ways so that you can continue if you want to pursue your designation. There are online classes that you can take, CCIM 101, 2, 3, and 4. You can take them virtually, just like we're doing right now with Zoom. They have a 5-week session that's available for all of the classes. And just this past week, they've announced a new intense 1-week online session. So you can take 101 in 5 days online. There's a morning session, there's a break, and then there's an afternoon session. You still have breakout rooms. You get to network with other people in the class, to share ideas and things like that. So that'll be in the email coming out from Paul on how to get registered for any of those classes if you're interested. And the second thing I'll mention is there is a new push from CCIM in conjunction with NAR about the second wave of work through the CARES Act 2.0, maybe it's even 3.0. You'll find that on social media through Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. CCIM just announced that yesterday, so there's another push. You click on the link, you put in your zip code, the program finds your senators and your House of Representative people, and it sends an email to them encouraging them for more additional work to help the economy as a result of COVID. So those are two things that are going on from CCIM, new classes and a new social media push to do some networking, and you'll find that out there. The last thing I get to do is I get to introduce Blaine. So we're gonna bring Blaine on. Blaine's not only an instructor with CCIM, but he's become a friend and a mentor to me, and many of you know him from teaching with CCIM, and he's up in the Orlando area. We're very happy to have him come on and talk to us about some different things that we can do to stay involved and engaged in these very difficult times. So Blaine, we're ready when you are.
Okay, thank you, Michael. While you're still on the microphone, can you hear me clearly?
Absolutely.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that will take over the, I'm also turning off my video camera, so I'm here, you can hear me, but I'm hoping that what you all see on the screen is an opening slide for the presentation today. Can you confirm that for me, Michael?
Absolutely.
Are we good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, off we go. Well, thank you all for inviting me back. I have taught CCIM classes many times in Miami. I have enjoyed them all. The photograph that you see there is one that I took myself at sunrise one day when I was walking before the class. So I have a great heart for your district and for all my friends and associates in South Florida. Thank you for inviting me back. This is a little different than we initially planned, but hopefully we'll be back sometime later in the year with a program for you that relates to the new book, as Fernando mentioned. But for now, the topic is to try to think about how we can turn what I've begun calling the great isolation into the great opportunity. How can we make the best use of this time? And so I've assembled a handful of ideas for you today. I'm going to present those to you. You heard Paul say that this is being recorded, so you will have access to the archive. You may choose to take some notes as we go. My goal is to try to present this information over the next, say, 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So off we go. So there were three primary categories that I try to think about. The first one is that I wanted to think about this idea of how I can improve my value proposition. As I wander the planet and talk to top producers and the rest of the arena, I frequently find that the value proposition is an easy to fix but often overlooked idea. We'll talk more about that, but just for the moment, let's say that there were 300 producers on our call today and only one principal. And after it was over, the principal said, hey, that was really enjoyable. I didn't realize there were so many people that could potentially help me. Could you send me a list of everyone who was in the group today? And then I'll pick one or two that might be able to help me with my particular property. So imagine that we sent a list that had, let's say, 300 names, and next to the names were the value propositions. Would our client be able to look at that roster of value propositions and pick out the right people to help them? How many of the 300 names would we even be able to place a value proposition next to? So that's why that topic is important to us. Next, I'm going to talk about this question that I'm asked frequently, which is, hey, now that we're in the midst of this big isolation, this big quarantine, should I continue on with prospecting just like I always have, or should I be doing something different? How can I engage them? What do I do about that? And then the third question is preparatory. This is going to be over. We know it's going to be over. Someday we'll start to return to something called normal. And when we get to that point, how can I be powerful? How can I build my capability in this sort of in-between innings here so that when I come back, I can increase my capture of the available business in the market that I serve? So those are the three questions that I'm going to try to work with you today. Now, in each case, I'm going to give you three ideas. I'm going to give you a simple idea that I think you can interact with in, say, 15 minutes. I'm going to give you a sort of moderately difficult idea, which might take you an hour to develop. And then I'm going to give you a more complex answer that would take you maybe a little bit longer. So for those of you who don't have much free time, you've got all of a sudden your home has been invaded by people you barely knew, your spouse, your kids, your dog, you're all in there together. You may only be able to implement the simple idea. Some of you have more time or can make more time. And some of you actually find that you have maybe a day a week or 2 days a week that you suddenly can use on what Stephen Covey would call quadrant 2 ideas. Remember those ideas that are important but not urgent. So you'll see this little graphic go by as we answer each question. So let me show you what I mean. So how can I improve my value proposition? Here's a simple idea for you. Claim it. Now, what I mean by claim it is, remember the example that I just gave you. Would we be able to write your value proposition next to your name if we submitted a list to someone? Now, here's an idea for you in terms of how to establish your value proposition. I like to state it in 10 words or less, and then roll it out. And an easy way to do that is put it in your email signature. So here's how you can tell whether you have a powerful value proposition. If you were to sit next to someone on an airplane, well, 6 feet from someone on an airplane, and they said, oh, hello, my name is Jennifer. What is your name and what do you do? And if you were to state your value proposition, if Jennifer looked at you and go, oh, so do you deal with this? Or is this the kind of thing that you do? So when you state your value proposition to someone and they ask you a good question in return, you know you've hit fairly close to the mark. An even more powerful question that they could ask you is, oh, well, do you know Blaine Strickland? Or they begin to associate you with somebody they know. And so you'll know that you have a powerful value proposition when someone asks a good question. Now, I work with a guy named Bo Beery up in Gainesville, and we've spent a lot of time working on his value proposition, and this is his. We help investors find and buy multifamily assets. Pretty powerful, right? Think about that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. That's right. That's a screenshot right off of his personal website. But imagine seeing that block at the bottom of your email signature. So give that some thought. I find that we do not do a very good job as a group of distinguishing what we do. And what you have to think about is, it seems clear to you, and maybe the people that are in your arena, the other people in your office, like, oh yeah, that's our industrial guy, or that guy does nothing but sell top-end multifamily properties. We may be aware of it internally, but our prospects and our clients are not nearly as tuned in. And so we've got to make it easy for them to choose us. And this is an easy way to do it. Okay, let's look at a little more moderate idea on this idea of improving your value proposition. And I just phrase that as explain it, which is that if someone gave you the opportunity to help them understand it, if they said to you, could you give me an example? Or if I had something that I could send to you, would that be interesting to you? Here's a couple of ideas for you. Many of you are familiar with this acronym CART, which stands for Challenge, Action, Result, and Testimonial. So think in terms of you preparing a one-pager on some situation where you contributed to the success of the outcome. So the first segment, I don't like to say paragraph because I don't want to be thinking about a page that has 600 words on it, but the first segment would be the challenge. The client had a building that was in disrepair, and wanted to sell it immediately. The action, the next segment would be, so they called us in, and the action that we took was to help them make a list of necessary improvements, and we were able to get those improvements done in a timely manner. The third paragraph, the result, the third segment would be, as a result of taking these actions, we were able to put the property under contract within 30 days and close 30 days later. And then the testimonial would be Mr. Bill Jenkins is quoted as saying as Fernando was a superior project manager. Without his input and follow through, we would not have gotten this done. I will use Fernando in the future. That's the idea of a very simple testimonial. You can craft it yourself and then go to the client. You can work with the client to develop it, but there is there's always an opportunity to create a testimonial and no limit to what you can do with it. It can be some of the most powerful the most powerful ideas that you can convey. If you were to go to my website as an example, I have a whole segment on testimonials. You click on it and it drops down and there's faces and names and 2 or 3 sentences. And I love driving people to that because what they end up seeing is, hey, I know that guy. I go, great, why don't you call him? His number's right there. Another way you could do it that you could think about is to create a recommendation on LinkedIn. I think almost all of us are fairly tuned to LinkedIn today. I have given up on, I hardly ever look at Facebook, and I look at LinkedIn probably 5 times a day. I have notifications set up so that I receive those notifications. And LinkedIn is a very powerful communicator in the business world. So if you were to go to my profile on LinkedIn, and you scroll down to recommendations, you would see that I have 21 recommendations received. I've given out 25 recommendations because I mentioned this to a lot of clients. So if you were my client, I would say, hey, if I can help you with that, I would be happy to do that. But look up there in the upper right-hand corner where it says ask for a recommendation. LinkedIn makes it incredibly easy for you to click right there and then send a note to someone pre-formatted that says, hey, Michael Hinton, could you write a recommendation for me? And it flows very naturally back and forth. You get a chance to approve it before it's actually posted. I feel so strongly about this that for the first 3 years, I've been a nothing but a coach for 10 years. In the first 3 years of that 10-year run, I didn't have a website because I used LinkedIn. And the way I drove LinkedIn is not only did I keep it up to date, but I constantly drove people down to the recommendations. I would say be sure to scroll down and see the whole site. Okay, here's the most complex idea in this category, which is to broaden your value proposition. And if you are a Thrive reader, you know that I'm a fan of Gantt charts. I don't think we often see ourselves truly as project managers, although our clients almost always see us as my guy, my girl. This is the person who gets the job done for me. And so a Gantt chart is simply a sequential listing of the tasks that have to be undertaken to get the project done. Any construction firm that you've ever interacted with works on a Gantt chart on every single project, they have people on their staff that can develop them. So if you have no exposure to this whatsoever, you could talk to a friend that's in the construction world and they will happily show you how they use it to build a building. You can Google it, of course. You can go to Lynda, LYNDA.com, and take a class on it, a very simple 1 hour, here's how it works kind of idea. Remember that I have never advocated for you to become the maker of these Gantt charts. They can be complicated. It depends on how sophisticated you're trying to make it, but you can go to Upwork now and hire people for $25 an hour to do it very quickly for you and create something that you can use in your presentations. I personally believe you should create a template and then use it whenever you can in an initial outreach, and then customize it when you get into the actual account management. Let me show you something I just pulled off the internet a couple days ago. If you were to go to blog.powercre.com, you would see this picture. I know it's small. Some of you are watching on your phone, but what you see there is a 50+ step Gantt chart. In fact, this is really only the graphic illustration of a Gantt chart, but it shows a 12-month lease transaction schedule, all the steps that the prospect would have to go through in order to get from where they are today to moving into, say, their new space. So imagine that you and I were competing for an opportunity to list a property. And I said to the, to represent a tenant to move. And I said to the tenant, look, this is where I live. This is the arena that I traffic in. And I want to show you exactly what we're going to do for you. We're going to lead you through these 50 steps over this time period. And I'd love to have an opportunity to work through that, make sure you understand it. But Mr. Jenkins, you have to understand, these 50 steps have to be completed, whether I do it, you do it for yourself, or you choose someone else. And they're like, wow, I didn't realize there were so many steps. I didn't realize that it had to be so carefully coordinated. And you go, yeah, exactly. That's my value proposition. This is what I do for you. I guide you skillfully through these steps. Now imagine that you came in to make a presentation after I had just said that. Can you see the power and the value proposition that I've offered? And what if Mr. Jenkins said to you, so could you explain your process to me? And you started to sort of wander narratively through the story. It's not nearly as powerful as a document like this, where you can effectively show, you can effectively convey your value proposition into the minds of the prospect. Okay, so there's 3 ideas on how you can improve your value proposition. Let's talk about 3 ideas for how you should be engaging your clients and prospects now. Simple idea. Post self-crafted content on social media. Stop. Here's what I find. When people ask me about this and I sit down with them to start talking about this, the first question I ask is, so let's just say you had a list of your top clients. Let's just say 100 top clients, people that you would really want to communicate with through social media. Could you spend a day and figure out how many of those people that are your top prospects you are also linked to on social media? And what you're going to discover is it's somewhere between 25 and 30%. So what you see a lot of times in these people that are very active in social media is that they're educating all the rest of us. So before you get all wound up in the social media arena, I would just ask you to think about what your goals are. If it's your goal to use social media to communicate with your clients, have you taken the time to go through your roster and make sure you are connected to Mr. Jenkins, because you're thinking about him as the avatar, the most likely recipient of your messaging, and you may not be linked into him? What I find on my own LinkedIn account, and I'm linked to about 2,800 people, is that the same 50 people comment all the time. They like social media, they love to comment, that's great. But what I have to be thinking about there is many times I am educating or keeping in touch with the allies more so than the principals. So my first question to you is, how does your social media strategy set up in relation to your target audience if your principals are your target audience? Okay, Blaine, I got it. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to make it better. And I said, great. Then as you think about self-crafted content, which means not simply passing on somebody else's message, what you could be thinking about is trying to create engagement, which is asking a question. I'm finding this is happening. What are you finding? My buddy Bo Beery, I just showed you his value proposition, recently conducted a survey of about 150 multifamily owners, and he's beginning to share the results of his survey. And people cannot resist looking at that information and then making a comment on it. And it's that commentary, that back and forth engagement that makes it so powerful. If you have a more complicated story or something that would be really valuable, what I would suggest that you do is give a small description of it, and then say, if you'd like this, you know, comment below, or they can use the messaging feature in LinkedIn. So the goal, again, of social media, as you already know, is to create engagement. So instead of blindly saying, well, I have to get something out every day, I would tell you that I get something out maybe once a week, and my posts have a very high viewership and a very high traction component. In other words, I get lots of views and I get lots of engagement, questions, thumbs up, those kinds of things. Okay, so that's an easy one. Here's a little bit more moderate one. Here's what I want you to do. I'm going to be your coach here for 2 more minutes. What I want you to do is I want you to think about 10 people that you could or should have reached out to over the past year. Maybe it's clients that you did business with before. Maybe it's allies, the lenders, the appraisers, the engineers, the property inspectors, but people that will take time to have a conversation with you. And this is your opportunity in this in-between inning stage that we're in, is to engage with these people with an eye toward learning. The idea of learning is to say, so how do you find it? Or this is what I heard, what is your reaction? And you'll find that they'll have time to spend a few minutes with you and have these conversations. What I want you to think about is the idea of what you can be learning from them and gaining their perspective, sometimes gaining even very valuable anecdotes. A fantastic way to engage people is to say, hey, I'm checking in with you. I had a conversation with somebody else that made me think of you. This is what their comment was. I wonder what your perspective on that idea is. Once you learn something, then it's the natural evolution of that idea to share that. So what I want you to be thinking about is, as you're interviewing or interacting with these people you haven't talked to for a while, gather information from them and be thinking about how you might be able to convey that. Maybe back to point 1, where you can do it in social media. I had an interesting conversation today with an attorney. He made this remark. What do you think? That can be a great way to do it. But it also ties into our next more complex idea on this front, which is to offer an online learning session. That's what you're in the midst of right now, by the way. You are in the midst of a 20-30 minute engagement session. What if you were to be able to say to your clients, listen, I've taken this time to do some very interesting surveying about attitudes in the market. I've taken this time to look carefully at data, and I've learned a few things that I would be happy to share with you. Almost every organization that we interact with is just desperately seeking ways to engage with their own people. So what if you offered a lunch and learn concept? You know, you were doing this before where you'd say, look, let me bring a plate of sandwiches over and we'll sit down and I'm going to give you the 3 or 4 most relevant, most acute, most timely ideas about what's going on in the marketplace, or going on with the kinds of properties that you deal with. So the idea here is to be thinking that as you're interacting with people, that you are learning and you are beginning to think about, how could I convey that? Wouldn't it be fantastic if you managed to come up with a way to hold your own webinar or your own conference call and create engagement on their side? They are thirsty for it, I promise you. You could think about a book study. A lot of people are gathering around books. And so you might find something and say, look, what if we had a little group of maybe 8 people, and let's invite those people to join in, and we'll read 2 chapters a week, and we'll do it for 3 weeks, and we'll kind of cover the topic and create a little way to engage. A lot of people are reporting that their readership is way, way up. I know that I'm always reading a lot, but I've gotten a lot more reading done lately because I've had time to do it. Another thing you could think about is, what if we gathered around a fire starter, an idea fire starter? So maybe if it were a principal, as an example, we said, listen, most of the time our conversation is around making your space the most attractive that it can be to tenants and to prospective tenants. So what if we spent 30 minutes and had a little whiteboard session right on the screen with each other and tried to think about ways that we could make the space more compelling? What kinds of things would we do if we had no budget, if we could do anything we wanted? Okay, great. What if $10,000 fell from the sky? What would we do if we could spend $10,000 on your property, but it had to meet strict criteria of making it more compelling in the marketplace? So the combination of you providing the content, working around existing content like a book, or even using it as a brainstorming session can be a very powerful way to create engagement in this time where we, on one hand, are sort of stymied and can't really do the things that we want. We're learning every day about the evolution of this situation, but this is an opportunity through engagement to really do what you're doing right now, which is spending quadrant 2 time. Important, but not urgent, but getting smarter, getting ideas. What could you do? Who could you call together and engage them? And if you pushed it to its ultimate, what client should you be calling right now and offering an idea as a way to engage? Okay, let's move on to idea number 3. How can I increase my market penetration when the market returns? So this is the third of our 3 questions, and I have 3 ideas in this bundle as well. Here's the sort of simple idea, if you will, which is scour your database. As I wander around and I ask people about their CRM, and that's my full-time job. So I get a lot of exposure to organizations, brokerage organizations around the country. And I would tell you that when I ask this question, I would say that the best I have ever gotten is sort of B+. Most people feel that their database is B+ or less, many times much less. So when I say scour your database, and I say try to find 3 new conclusions, one of the things that you might do is just simply come up with a grade for your own database. What if I forced you to create some kind of scorecard, and you said, what do you mean by a scorecard? And I said, well, how comprehensive is it? Are the right people in it? And then how accurate is it? Meaning, do we have the information for those people? And then how up to date is it? That would be simply scouring your database. I'm sure, like me, you found yourself doing some things that needed to be done for a long time. Like in my case, had you come over a couple weeks ago and helped me, you would have had the opportunity to take all the screens off the window and clean out all the window sills and ledges and get all those bugs out, clean the screens up and put them back up, right? Should be done. Always able to push that back until you completely run out of things to do. Well, here's your chance. What if I said to you, look, this is going to last 60 more days. And instead of trying to look at today and say, I wonder what's the best use of my time today, what if I asked you, what would you like to have done 60 days from now? And work backwards to today. And it won't take you long before you say, well, if I really did what I should do, I should make my database better. Once you get it, once you feel better about it, you can begin to look for what I call new conclusions. And what that might be would be groupings of properties like, wow, I never realized that there were so many properties in that trade area or on that street or at that intersection. You might find that as you begin to check things out, it's like, wow, I didn't realize that there were 5 property owners that control 40% of the marketplace. I never really thought of it that way. Wow, I never realized that all the vacancy in that market is on the south side of that street, not the north side of that street. I wonder why that is. Now, if you really got techie with it, you could insert in your database what's called a user-defined field. All these databases enable you to create a brand new slot, if you will. You get to name that slot, and then you get to fill in that slot. You can conform the dropdown so that there's a dropdown box, and it only allows you to select 1 or 2 answers, east or west, you could have a flavor to it, which is aggressive, moderate, conservative. But my idea here for you is that if you had nothing but time and you could create some kind of outreach and you could gather an additional piece of information about the people that are in your database and possibly the properties as well, what question would you ask them? Now, let me give you the most unusual way that I saw a user-defined field used. I worked with someone who was a big wine aficionado, and he had, through the years, bought wine and given out wine to his clients at holiday time. And what he began to do was, when he interacted with them, he goes, hey, Mr. Jenkins, just before I let you go, I appreciate your time today, but just before I let you go, you know I'm a wine guy, and I've delivered wine to you. I just wonder, I want to take a minute and think about that with you. Are you a wine connoisseur? Do you enjoy getting the wine? Yes, no. And so right there's a drop-down field. And then if they say yes, then you go, okay, well, if you had your choice, would it be red wine or white wine? So as a result, what happened is that he began to collect this information. He could deliver red or white wine to exactly to the clients that he wanted to give it to in such a way that it was most valuable to them. So these are user-defined fields. And when I see user-defined fields in a database, I know that's a sign of good health. So if I came and visited you and I said, let's open up your database, and I saw some user-defined fields, whether they were technical, like only buys under 10 million, only buys in this county, only buys value add, only acts as a syndicator, great, those are all user-defined fields. They may even flood into more personal ideas as well. Okay, let's look at another idea. Let's look at that was the simple idea, if you will. Let's look at the moderate idea. So those of you who are Thrive readers know that the very first chapter says, look, you got to figure out who your top 125 prospects are. In Thrive, I give you this threshold. I say, look, make a list of the 125 people that will influence, which means award, a deal that you would like to have, that you care about, and that deal they will give birth to that deal at least one time in the next 5 years. So if that were true, that would mean that you would say, okay, there's 125 deals here inside this circle that are going to occur over the next 5 years, and my job is to capture as many as I possibly can. Well, Thrive has been out for 2 years. It's had 2 printings. I intend to create a second edition later this year, because this has been the most powerful idea in Thrive. And what I mean by that, and by the way, I didn't invent this idea of a top 125. What I discovered is that a lot of sales communities in all different businesses have this kind of idea, and we weren't using it very well. So I really just adapted it specifically to the way we work. And the people that have used it have had unbelievably powerful results. Many times what it means is that you can't always list out 125. And I'd say, great, start with what you can do. Start with what you have. I've had young people that say, listen, I have 35 names, but there's like 5 architects and 7 attorneys and of course 6 title guys in there. And it's like, well, you have to look at it as influencers at worst, principals at best, influencers at worst. Now, are those people going to be able to give you control of a deal when the day comes? So, figure out where you have to start and then grow the list. I have one client that started out with about 37 and over the course of a year grew it to 83. It's never grown past that. The reason it's never grown past that is because it became so powerful in that when he began to make high quality touches once a quarter, 4 times a year with these people, the amount of business that he was able to generate and has caused him to really focus almost all of his efforts on a very small group of people. Remember, the idea here, again, is a work backwards idea. 5 years from now, when I ask you, hey, could we take a look at the roster of all the deals that you've done? And we do that together. And I say, so is the 80-20 rule really true? And you're like, 20% of the people that I talk to are responsible for 80% of the money that I've made. And so this is simply pre-programming that idea. Now, one last thought for you here is you can certainly read the book. But if you go to hbs-resources.com, and that will appear on the screen here in just a moment, and click on webinars, there is a 45-minute webinar for free that you can click on, you and your whole team, and watch it. and understand what the top 125 program is. I have not trademarked that idea. I am just begging you to consider the employment of that idea in your personal business. Okay, and here is the most complex idea for you. This is a little bit of a tip of the hat to adapt the book that I've written that says, disruption is coming, are you ready? But imagine this, what if I said to you, could you predict the next 50 transactions that are going to occur in your area of responsibility, in your niche? Could you predict those? That's an interesting question. Well, of course, the way that some of you mathematicians would go after that is to say, well, what I would do is I would create an algorithm. What's an algorithm? Talk to the people here, Blaine. Well, the algorithm means that I'm going to look at the last 300 transactions and I'm going to look at the variables. I might have 20 variables for each transaction. Who was the buyer? Who was the seller? When did it close? How long was it on the market? How big is it? How old is it? What rate was it at? What zip code is it in? How recently was a capital improvement made? And if you could look at those, then you would create an algorithm. Now, you've touched algorithms already today, because when you try to figure out what you're going to watch on Netflix tonight or buy something in Amazon, then when you clicked on that, then something came up next to it and it said, oh, if you liked Thrive, you're going to love this book. If you liked I'm not even going to say Tiger King. If you liked this, you would like that. That's what an algorithm is, which is it predicts what you're going to do in the future because of what's happened in the past. Another way you could do it is I could say, well, let's say you don't have information there. Then I would say, all right, great, let's build a scorecard. And the scorecard would simply say, what causes things to sell in your niche? And you're like, Blaine, I'm telling you, if the owners are family member, longtime family members, they hardly ever sell. So if that's a factor, I would kind of weight that down. But I find that if someone makes a large capital improvement to the property, it almost always sells within a year because they want to harvest the value that they created. Blaine, I've found that properties that are heavily multi-tenanted sell a lot more frequently than the properties that are single tenant. And so we could create a scorecard. And I said, great, take that scorecard into the market with its relative weights. You get 50 points if there was a capital improvement. You get 30 points if it's north of the river. You get 20 points if it's occupied by banking or accounting, whatever the criteria might be, and scored the properties. And I said, wouldn't that be interesting if we made a list today of the properties that you think are going to sell next or transact next because you thought about it either in terms of the algorithm, mathematical information from the past, or a scorecard approach. So think about it. What if I said, look, you got an hour today, write down the next 50 properties that you think are going to transact, save it, put it in a mayonnaise jar, and then let's pull it out a year from now. And you're like, oh my gosh, 23 of those 50 properties sold. So you must be some kind of prognosticator. So what if we said, well, that's interesting. Now it's the spring of 2021. I go, hey, are you going to make up your list again? Like, yeah, I think I will. So my point of this, the point of this idea for you is that this is already happening in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of the way that the top brokers are starting to think about what's going to happen next. But if you wanted to increase your capture, your market penetration when the market returns, what if I could secretly arm you with, like, look, there's a better than 50-50 chance these are the 50 properties that are going to happen next. Would that help you? Would that increase your results in terms of being powerful when you come back? Well, why wouldn't you use this time to see if you could go down that path? Okay, there you go. I think that's a little over 20 minutes. I apologize for that, but there's 3 areas of consideration with 3 questions or 3 ideas each. So Michael, I guess I'm going to call on you to say, do we have time for questions? And are there any questions that I could answer at this point?
Sure. Couple of them that have come in, and let me go and stop. There we go. One of them is when you were talking about making phone calls, someone has asked about emails and their effect in this time period. I know it's hard to have a conversation in emails, but what are your comments on being effective with emails versus phone calls right now?
Well, a couple different ideas there. I don't know that emails are getting any more traction than they ever got. So it's not my personal opinion that you will suddenly get more traction on your emails. So if you're used to sending out a blast and 6% of the emails open, I don't think those results are going to change. I would attempt to make phone calls, but let me give you something else to think about in terms of your database, which is find a way to get their cell phones. One of the ways that I can tell there's maturity in a database is when I see those mobile phones, which brings in the idea of being able to text. And I don't care who you are, a text gets more traction. Now, you got to be careful not to abuse that, of course. Some of you might be familiar with slide text. I think you have to use that very, very carefully. But what I have found is that if I will send the right kind of text, I get the most traction of all. What if I said to you, look, pick your top 25 clients and see if you can find a way to get their mobile numbers, which is often a call. Listen, call me back at this number. And when they call back in today's world, they're going to call back on their mobile. So then you simply say, Michael, I see you call me from a 305 number. Is that your cell phone? Yes, it is. So I'm not sure you're getting more traction from email than you ever got. So therefore, I'm on the phone call side of the ledger.
And then we're great, great for that. And then another question that's come in, a little bit more about your Gantt chart. Is there a program or a sample, or do you have a recommendation on where to start your first one?
Well, I really think you would benefit from finding a 20, 30, maybe hour-long presentation on what a Gantt chart is if you've never been exposed to it. What you're going to discover is that if I sent you one today, you could instantly be able to read it because it's so logical in the way that it's presented. When I teach at the universities, I have my students take out a yellow piece of paper and I make them draw a Gantt chart for how to boil an egg. And just think about that exercise for a moment. What would you have to do? Well, I got to find the pan, and then I'm a guy who fills the pan with water and boils it. Once it's boiling, then I put the eggs in, and then I leave them in for 8 minutes, and then I transfer them to cold water for 5 minutes, and then I crack them. So you can see right there in your mind how a Gantt chart forms. But again, if you'll go to Smartsheet, or just go to YouTube and type in Gantt, or Microsoft Project, which is the granddaddy of the producer of Gantt charts, or as I mentioned before, go to Lynda, LYNDA.com, and watch. There's a 1-hour Gantt Chart 101 course, which is broken into 6-minute chapters.
Mm-hmm. Those are the questions that came in. If anybody else has any questions, send me a comment in the chat and we'll get it to Blaine right now. Otherwise, we'll be ready to wrap this up unless Fernando or Paul's got something else.
Michael, I want to make one more quick comment. People have asked me about these books. There are the 2 books. Thrive is 2 years old. Adapt is 3 weeks old. You can buy them in hardcover, Kindle, or audiobook version. Amazon, I can't believe it, has deemed my book as not essential. So if you buy it in hardcover, it arrives in about 4 weeks. You can also buy the hardcover if you're a hardcover reader on my website. I use a private fulfiller. It'll get there in about a week. But wherever you buy the hardcover, if you type in Adapt 2020, it'll give you 20% off the price. The Kindle is $9.99 and the audiobook's about $6. Remember that there are also, at that website right there, there are also 6 or 7 webinars for free posted there that you can look at as well.
Thank you very much for that bonus. We did get another question that came in. Blaine, do you have any comments on direct mail? I know a lot of residential agents use direct mail and postcards. Is it something that you see very often in the commercial side?
I don't see too much of that anymore. I have I have mailed books to people who have asked for them, and then asked them, "Hey, did you get the book?" It's like, I don't know. I haven't checked the mail in like 2 weeks. I was like, wow, I thought I was mailing something valuable, and you're not going down to the mailbox. So I'm a little concerned about direct mail on the commercial side. It would be great if you felt that you had the database that could make sure that, first of all, that it was delivered. And then second of all, what I like to do when I use direct mail, if I have 100 pieces to mail out, I'll mail 35 of them because I can make 35 calls in 1 week. And I'll just say, hey, Mr. Jenkins, Blaine Strickland here. Just checking in. I mailed you something I really thought would be valuable to you. It should have arrived about 3 days ago. If you find that, please take a look at it, and then let's talk on the phone about why it's important to you, how it impacts you. So if I'm going to use direct mail, I use it as a warm-up to the call that I'm going to follow up with 5 days later. If you're like, no, Blaine, I'm going to blast 10,000 pieces, then I would say, well, then prepare yourself for the same old 3% open rate that you get.
And one other thing, thank you. Can you comment on the use of expensive? Okay. Okay. The big the question is on comment of expensive commercial databases. You were talking about CRMs, and you may not. We understand if you don't want to mention a specific one. Do you find the free ones to be as effective as maybe some of the more expensive ones?
Well, here's my recommendation. I want the audience here to think about this for a moment. Does anybody know how many functions Microsoft Excel has? 470. And how many of those functions do you use? 5. And so what happens is if you said, Blaine, I got nothing to do for 3 weeks, I'm going to have each salesperson come in and make a 3-hour presentation to me. Then I'm going to pick free or not. And what I would tell you is that you get all focused on all these unbelievable things that these CRMs can do. And in reality, you use about 5 functions. So my suggestion to you is that you create a very strong scorecard of what you're looking for. It absolutely has to be able to do this. It absolutely has to be able to do that. It absolutely has to be to do these other things, so that when you go hunting for your CRM, you know exactly what you're looking for and you're happy. But it would be almost like me sending you the spec sheet on a brand new car, and there's 62 features there. And then I end up going, so Michael, why did you buy that car? And it's like, oh man, this thing's got like 8 cup holders. I'm like, really? It was about cup holders for you? It's like, yeah, I got influenced by the cup holders. And so people say things to me and I go, why did you choose that database? And I'm like, well, it integrates with Microsoft Outlook. And it's like, was that important to you? It's like, and actually I haven't even read the manual on that part of it yet. So I just want to say to you that what works best is the database that accomplishes the 2 or 3 key functions that you want and that you will commit yourself to participating with, that you will put some effort into it. But if you don't care about a Gantt chart maker and a pipeline system and a war room where you can have lots of people looking at the same documents, then don't buy that.
Excellent. We got one last question. Are you a fan of any particular or specific predictive analytics product? You mentioned some of, going through and predicting things that are coming. So do you have any predictive analytics product that you're a fan of for lead generation? And then I'll pass it back over to Paul. We'll wrap this up.
No, I am not. I'm not in the corner of any particular predictive software. What I can tell you is that if you were to spend 1 hour at Khan Academy or lynda.com or just poking around and trying to understand what they mean when they say predictive, it's all about the algorithm. And so if you haven't thought about an algorithm since trigonometry, which for me, I didn't get a good grade in anyway, it would be worth it to do that, because again, you're going to be a better buyer of predictive software if you know what an algorithm, what it really means. If nothing else, go to Zillow and read their little small print. It says, hey, we're Zillow and here's your Zestimate. We think your house is worth $384,000. And you go down and read the paragraph that explains how they came up with that. Even that would be a step in the right direction in terms of understanding what's meant by a predictive algorithm.
Excellent. Paul, you wanted to wrap up with something else here?
Yes, I just wanted, I'm not going to be able to recognize everyone. I apologize. But I do want to recognize past commercial presidents, Maria Hunkadea, John Dom, who's also our chairman, Chairman Chepe, Chairman-elect Jennifer Woolman. I'm sorry if I forgot anyone I should have went through. Mike Silver is on here as well, J.R. Steinbauer. I should go through everyone else, or I should have right before I ended this. Several people that are current board members and past board members. Many, many thanks to Blaine. We've gotten great feedback. And I don't know if Fernando has anything else he wants to say as well, or Michael wants to thank everyone in Exit as well. As I mentioned, we will be sending this PowerPoint, which John Dom will have the Gantt chart that Blaine Strickland had in his presentation. And then we'll have the recording and the presentation linked and available to you. Should be by the end of the day. I have all your emails captured. Michael, Fernando?
Yeah, I just wanted to say before we leave, hey, guys, we're creating all of these presentations to share with you all, but you guys are, the boots on the ground, right? You are professional commercial practitioners, and we would love your feedback. Reach out to us. Let us know if there's anything else that we can do for the membership. If you're, if there are issues that you're addressing at a very specific level with your clients, and there's anything that we can use to provide some light and to provide some guidance, and maybe even bring professionals like Blaine Strickland to provide that for us, then please let us know. This is an ongoing conversation. And I just want to say that it brings me so much joy to see Mike Silver here. Mike, how are you? Unmute yourself. I would love to hear you for a second.
Okay, I figured out how to do that. How do you like that? Everything? Okay, thanks for asking.
Great to see you, Mike. Great to see you all. God bless you guys. Be safe.
Oh, Fernando, before we go,
Mhm.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to extend an invitation to today at 3 o'clock. Try to look it up. Casey Conway with the CCIM president, Institute president. They're going to be everywhere. They're going to be in Zoom. They're going to be in YouTube. It's going to be a great presentation of about 1 hour. This is part of our CCIM meetings, mid-year meetings, and everybody's invited. So please go participate. It's going to be a fantastic opportunity to learn and understand how to fare with what's going on and what's going on and what's going to happen next. Casey Conway is the economist of CCIM, among some other things. We've been hearing a lot of him. This is going to be a great presentation. If you can, just look for it. I'll try to send Paul information if you don't have it yet, just to send it to everyone if you can.
Oh, and I see that down here that commercial